advance for any cat noises anyone will hear. Two of them are currently going at it. And because you are children, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a child. And if a child, also an heir through God. Advent, Christmas, it's been quite a week. At Christmas Eve service, many of us heard Kerwin's and Tracy's words about Jesus's small hands and what those hands would grow into doing. In our culture, we've had a recent re-respect, so to speak, of the power of our family of origin stories, discovering the lessons behind the lessons of how we were raised. And I mention this because Christmas is, among so many other deep things, such a family of origin story, isn't it? And since we were made in God's image, our family of origin story, we honor that too. Or we struggle with understanding it now that we're grown, which is also a way of honoring what God has given us. A woman I met years ago started a dialogue with me this way. A therapist told me that I wasn't raised really, I just grew up, meaning that the tasks and the beauty of growing up had, in her mind, fallen to her. And still decades later, she was still at it. But the good news in her case was that when each of her parents died, she had long since reconciled with each of them and was there. Amen, sister. How are we in our own ways doing the hard work of honoring where we came from, especially in this season of so many people questioning and struggling with that? Holidays are hard. Honoring the lessons behind the lessons that we've all learned. In this, the church's seasons of lessons and carols, as we like to say, lessons that we as Christians keep learning, and then we keep learning them again and again, year over year. How do we do that? How do we keep doing that? And what, more importantly, do we do with what we're learning? This beautiful poetry from the gospel today. He was in the world and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. What must have that been like, living in a time that the world didn't quite understand who he was? We know our own version of that now, here in almost 2022, of course. So much of our world today doesn't know him. So much of our world today doesn't know or feel how our gospel reading put it. God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Sorry, everyone. Perhaps part of our New Year's blessing and our New Year's challenge will continue to be in these winter days to reflect on these two things. The gifts we have been given of being asked to be God's hands in this hurting world. We need to keep thinking about that. Keep thinking about it in new ways. Our world still has its places that are in winter dark that don't know this like we know this. Our own personal worlds may still have places in the winter dark that don't know this as we think we know this. How can we work to keep finding them? How can, in this winter season, we work to be part of this? What has come into the being with him was life, and the life was light of all the people, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. The poet John O'Donohue wrote that Christmas reminds us in glory about the simplicity and wonder of one day. It unveils the extraordinary that our hurried lives conceal and neglect. His short poem ends with this: We have been given such immense possibilities. We desperately need to make clearances in our tangled lives and let our souls breathe. We must take care of ourselves and especially our suffering brothers and suffering sisters. Our psalm today says, God has established peace at our borders. God satisfies you with the finest wheat. Yes. And so many, though, are not at peace with the borders of their lives. So many do not have access to the finest wheat, or sadly, any wheat at all. There are so many in our culture who don't see, so that we can share wheat, whether it's a Eucharist or just a simple physical meal with them. Do we see Christ in them? Or, as Martin Luther put it, and I paraphrase, we don't have to look far to find Christ. Christ is in you, and each one of you. Christ is in each one of our neighbors who may need a lot of extra care this week, given the freeze that's coming in, hopefully lighter than most of us have been warned it would be. Luther emphasized, Paul everywhere calls them holy, those children and heirs of God. Luther says, you can say that the sins which we commit every day offend God, and therefore none of us are saints. And to this I reply, mother love is stronger than any filth a child will ever find on them. So the love of God the love of God to us and toward a stranger is the same, stronger than the dirt that clings to any of us. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become the children of God, who were born not of blood, or of the will of the flesh, or the will of man, but of God. Beautiful words from the gospel. We are each still at heart children and beloved of God. What can we each continue to do this Christmas season to really feel that, and far more importantly, to help others feel that? This precious gift that Jesus came into the world to give us. What can we do even more this year to help others learn to feel that? Amen.
Amen.